We're here on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Yesterday, we began this new parak, the fourth parak of Cholates, and we began the Gemara that quotes a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. What was the case? The Yavam jumped the gun, and almost immediately after the death of his brother, he gave a chalitza to his sister-in-law, under the assumption that there's a mitzvah of Yibum, and she fell for Yibum. So he gave a chalitza. The only problem is, maybe he knew or maybe he didn't know, but she was pregnant. On the other hand, and here's as far to rah and validate this chalitza, even though she's pregnant, she didn't carry till term, and he pila. So at the end of the day, she really did fall for Yibum because her late husband died childless. The only problem is, that's where Reish Lakish comes in here, that at the moment that he gave her chalitza, she was a muberes, meaning according to the facts on the ground and the anticipation, we expected her to give birth and have a child, in which case chalitza is meaningless because there's no nefila for Yibum. Rabbi Yochanan argues that chalitza, even though she was pregnant at that time, is a valid chalitza in this particular case where she never had a hapola, she had a miscarriage, and she didn't give birth. Now, Rabbi Yochanan adds another point, which seems to be almost identical with his first point on a logical basis, that if, let's say, the Yavam chose to be Miyaben, his sister-in-law, and she was pregnant, but then we find out that she could not and did not carry till term, she had a miscarriage, then he was Onamer, and he fulfilled the mitzvah of Yibum. Had she carried till term and given birth to a normal child, then he would have been in violation of an Isser Erva Veishasah. But now we get to Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish on a tzricha chalitza min ha'ach. Why? Because chalitza muberes lo shma chalitza. We cannot recognize the validity of a chalitza of a muberes, because again, at the moment of the chalitza, if we isolate, freeze that frame of time, that moment in which he gave her chalitza, she was a muberes, and the anticipation was that in Mitzvah Hashem, there'll be a mazel tov, and her late husband actually had a child, and therefore the chalitza in its time is an invalid chalitza. We need another chalitza to replace it. Not only that, bias muberes lo shma bia. Here Reish Lakish is going even further. He's saying that if the Yavam was Makayim Yibum, meaning he had a relationship with her, and then at the end of the day she had a miscarriage, then bias muberes lo shmei bia. Which I think means that he was not miyamim. I don't know, the Masechet throws me off a little bit here. He says, L'chein af im lebasof yuvar shavlad haya nefa chalitzasa psula. Okay, fine. But what about just 1 second. I'm trying to figure this out. Is here chalitzasa psula? 1 second. What about this status of the Yibum? Since Reish Lakish says tzricha chalitza min ha'achim, it means that the Yibum is not a valid Yibum because she needs a chalitza, and with this chalitza she can get married to anyone she wants to. You follow me, Rabbi? There's a little bit of a logical gap here. Maybe in your footnote it'll be clearer. In mine, he lets you fill in the missing gap here. How do you see in Reish Lakish that even though later on it turns out that she had a miscarriage, that the bia is lav shmei bia. I mean, he says because she needs chalitza. So you have to add another few words here, I think, to fill in the gap. That the very fact that Reish Lakish requires chalitza means that the yibum was not a yibum. I mean, after yibum, there's no such thing as chalitza. Jeff, you have anything in your note that clarifies this?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I borrow your Gemara just for a minute? I'll give it right back. I just want to see, it'll take me a second just to see if he adds any footnote here. It says, the yibum of a pregnant woman is not deemed a valid yibum. No, he doesn't say anything. He just translates the words. Okay. So the Gemara says, "B'may komiflagi." What is the logic of this machlokas? Ibai say mikra, Ibai say svara. Ibai say svara. Yochanan says that the chalitza muberes is a valid chalitza in a case where she had a nefel. Savar, he holds that since at the end of the day the vlad was a nefel, so already at the moment that he did the chalitza, even though she was pregnant at that time, she fell for yibum. There was a zikas yibum, and therefore chalitza would be valid, would be recognized, and would be meaningful. Because again, if you tell me there's no chalitza to muberes, that's because we don't know whether the vlad is a nefel or not. So misafek, maybe the vlad will be a viable being. We're not going to allow chalitza. Chalitza is not a good idea. But if we know at the end that the vlad was a nefel and he had delivered the goods, so to speak, he had implemented chalitza, then it's a valid chalitza. And to dramatize this and pedagogically, push this into our minds, to penetrate our minds, he says, what would have happened if a pregnant woman, Elio would say, B'yomar, he tell us, that this pregnancy is not going to reach its fruition, and the vlad is going to be a nefel, mi lav bas chalitza v'yibamu. In other words, if we had some evidence, I mean, today I don't think you would need Elio and Navi. Unfortunately, you can do it. You can declare. You can determine the inviability of the vlad. The vlad is already not surviving. This you can determine with what's it called? Not an X-ray. What do they call it? A ultrasound, right? To do an ultrasound. And that's why pregnant women today have ultrasounds every 3 months or whatever it is. But in the other days, back in the day of Gemara, you would meet Elio to tell you that she's not going to carry a viable being, that what she has there is a nefel. And if Elio could predict that she's not going to be able to carry a full term and she'll give birth to a nefel, then mi lav bas chalitza v'yibumi? Are you going to tell me that he can't give a chalitza or be miyabima? We have an absolute clarity that the vlad is going to be a nefel. And therefore, for sure, it could be cholet. It's hashtanami here too, where although we're in the dark, we don't know one way or the other. But at the end, we find out that she gave birth to a nefel. Is tiglai milsa mafreya? Why not apply lemafreya? Which means that huvar adavar lemafreya. Just 1 second. I think I may have made a mistake also. Right. I made a mistake. Sorry. We're on Daf Chavav. Okay, so this is everything we did now is for my next year. Okay. So I saw John before you came in, Jeff, and I said, all right, that's where we are. But I messed it up. This is the first time since we started Yevamos that both shiurim are in the same volume. So it's a little bit tricky,
That's why I said it.
Yeah, I understand. So as okay. So whatever we did, Rabbi Say, until now belongs to the next year. Okay, but again, we didn't lose anything. I don't think it was good. All right, so we're on Daf Chav Vav, and I'll start from the beginning. We began yesterday the third parak of Yevamot, yeah, in this context, and we learned the Mishnah, and now we're up to the Gemara. Okay, then. Now, what we saw in the Mishnah is that 4 brothers, 2 of them married 2 sisters, and those who were married to 2 sisters died without children. And as far as the other 2 brothers that survived them, that we call them Levi and Yehuda, Choltos v'lo Misyavos. So the Gemara says, Shema Mino, we see that the underlying principle in our Mishnah is Yesh Zika. Now, why is it so that we can derive, how do we derive from our Mishnah Yesh Zika? It means that there's a connection already between the Yavama and the Yavam, even before Yibu, which makes it into like an Ishus. It's almost as if they're married. And therefore, Leah becomes Achos Ishto. Right? So let's take Levi, for example. We can do the same thing with Yehuda, but let's try it with Levi, right? So now Leah and Rachel, 2 sisters, fall from 2 different brothers for Yibum to Levi. And since there's Zika, the other sister is Achos Ishta. Why? Because Zika is like Ishus. The E ain't Zika. If, on the other hand, you would deny the equation between Zika and Ishus, then the Hani Mitrei Bati Ka'asyan. Why can't Levi be miyabim, let's say, Rachel, and Yehuda will be miyabim Leah? Well, what's the problem? I mean, there's no erva of Eshes of Achos Ishto because it's not Ishto. So that would be if Ein Zik. The Gemara rejects this. The Olam Emelecha Ein Zik. I'm going to reconcile our Mishnah with the Shita that holds Ein Zik. So now we have to ask the question, why in the case that Rachel and Leah, 2 sisters, fall for Yibam to Levi and Yehuda, why can't they each be miyabim, respectively, one of the 2 sisters? Mishum de Kasavar, Asur levatel mitzvahs yevamim. We have to do whatever we can to avoid closing the door on the mitzvah of Yibum. In other words, once there's a mitzvah of Yibum, then we're not allowed to do something active that would cause the bittul of that mitzvah. How does that apply in this case of our Mishnah of Arba Achim? Dilma ad miyabim chad maisei idach become a vatel mitzvahs yevamim. So let's say, for example, Levi would be miyabim Rachel, right? Let's say Reuben was married to Rachel, she now falls for Yibam to Levi, and Levi was miyabim Eshes Reuben Rachel. And then, Mayis Ida, Yehuda, the other live brother, now dies. And he hasn't gotten a chance yet to be miyabim Leah because he died. So in this case, right, let's say Shimon was married to Leah, Shimon died, and now the matching would have it that Yehuda would now marry Eshes Shimon, and that's Leah. What happened? Yehuda died, and now Leah is in a funny situation. Why? Because since she is the widow of the late Shimon, she is now Skuka Liyibam. However, Yehuda's gone. So now all eyes turn back to Levi. She falls for Yibam to Levi. Levi was already Miyabim, her sister Rachel. So there's no possibility for Levi to be Miyabim Leah, because Leah is the sister of his wife Rachel. The Kamavato mitzvahs Yevamot. Lachein tiknu chachamim sheyachlotz leRachel sha'afim yomas Yehuda achar sheyachlotz Levi leRachel yuchal lachlotz leLeah even shehi achos chalutza v'ein asur el midrabban. Now, what's strange about this Gemara is that we're closing the door on Yibum because of the possibility in the scenario that we described that Yehuda dies and he wasn't Miyabim Leah, and Leah now falls for Yibum to Levi, but Levi can't be Miyabim Leah because he's already been Miyabim Rachel, his sister, and therefore he's going to have to give a chalitza. So because of this, we're going to require that Levi be choletz Rachel, so that now, in the event that Yehuda dies and Leah falls for Yibum to Levi, Levi can now give her chalitza. And it turns out that Levi now does chalitza to both Rachel and Leah, which is not a problem because Rachel and Leah each respectively fell for Yibum through a different brother. And that's preferable to the other option, which would have been to allow each one to be having the other sister and run the risk that one of the two would not fall for Yibum. That we close the door on Yibum because once the first brother was Miyabim one of the two sisters, then the other sister could not possibly the situation would not lend itself to Yibum insofar as she's up. I'm not sure I understand the logic.
Closing the door early to prevent closing the door.
Right. Something strange about this. I remember we once had a Gemara like this, and I didn't understand it that time either. Let me just see if by chance in a million there's any clarification here in the footnote. In footnote Lamed Zayin, he quotes a Gemara much later on in Masechet. Let's see, you can leave that for later. And in the next footnote, Lamed Ches, he says that Rashi, it seems, Eina tzricha shniya lachlotz achar yibem es harishonik shishonim v'u mishtishonim esenu. I mean, he has a discussion here as to whether or not Leah actually needs chalitza. In other words, once Levi was miyabem Rachel, then Leah becomes, as far as Levi is concerned, achos ishto. And achos ishto doesn't require yibum or chalitza. It's one of the 15 arayos. Yeah, but I would say this is a little bit different because she wasn't achos ishto when she fell for Yibum, just that she was designated for Yehuda, and unfortunately Yehuda died. Now she falls back to Levi. I would assume that since at one point after the death of Shimon, Leah's husband, Leah needs chalitza, then the fact that Levi married Rachel in a Yibum situation, and then subsequently Yehuda died, I don't think that that's enough to remove the requirement of chalitza. So what's the Gemara's kashi? Hachi, if the reason why they both are excluded from Yibum is because of quote unquote asul levatel mitzvos Yevamot, why did the Mishnah have to tell me a case of arba achin afilu b'tlasa? Let's say there are three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and two of them are married to Rachel and Leah, two sisters. Now Reuven and Shimon die, and Leah and Rachel and Leah fall for Yibum to Levi. Levi's the only live brother, the only brother. Okay. So the Gemara says the din will be that Levi cannot be miyabem either one of them. Why? If he'll be miyabem, one of them, let's say he'll be miyabem, for example, Rachel, then there's a bittul mitzvos Yibum from Leah, right? Because once he's miyabem Rachel, then Leah becomes achos ishto. So there's no possibility of Yibum vis-a-vis Leah once he's miyabem Rachel. So even in the case of Shlosha Achim, you could have taught me this halacha of asul levatel mitzvos Yibumim. Why the Mishnah have to give me a case of arba Achim? Why not a case of Shlosha? He adds another note over here that in this parak, all the Mishnayos speak about Shlosha Achim, except for this one here at the beginning, which speaks about 4 Achim. All this is a problem based on Li'olam Eimolacha, which is the Gemara that's pushing for reconciling our Mishnah with Ein Zika. But let's go back to the original understanding of this Gemara, that our Mishnah reflects and is predicated upon the Shita of Yesh Zika. If it's Yesh Zika, then there's no possibility of Yibum because of Achos Kukasa. So now we can justify why the Mishnah formulates the din in a case of 4 Achim, because it's teaching me Yesh Zika. Is afilu k'shayevamot ofeles lifnei shnei achim v'kol shkein b'shlosh achim sheyevamot ofeles lifnei ach ech. So there's an additional chiddush here of yesh zika, even in the case where there are 2 achim. So the Gemara says, lo mi boy kamrina. The case of 3 Achim goes without saying. There was no need for the Mishnah to teach me the case of 3 Achim. Why? Lo mi boit losa devade butler mitzvos Yevamot. There's once Levi's miyabim Rachel, then Leah doesn't have even a possibility of Yibum because she's achos ishta. Aval arba. In the case of our brother, there are 2 Yevamot, there's Levi and Yehuda. So I might think that in this case, there's no chashash of bittul mitzvos Yibum, because if Levi's miyabim Rachel, Yehuda can nevertheless be miyabim Leah. And I would have said, L'misa lo chayshinan. We don't have to consider the possibility and worry about Yehuda dying before he implements the Yibum, such that now Leah has no possibility of evil. But rather, Yehuda is alive and well, which means both Yehuda and Levi can marry each one respectively Rachel and Leah. So mashmalon that we are choshish Misa, and therefore we're afraid that after Levi was miyavim Rachel, Yehuda might die, and Leah doesn't have chalitza. It's therefore the Mishnah brought a case of 4 ach. Right, to mechadish this finish that we're choshin lemis. So again, all this is apparently working out even if I hold ein zika. As we said before, if I hold yesh zika, then the Mishnah can be understood kipshuta because of the Isra Achos Kukaso, which is generated by yesh zika. And the Mishnah therefore understandably formulated the case of Arba Achim to teach me that there is Zika even in the case of Shnei Achim. Now the Gemara is saying I can even reconcile the Mishnah and explain, justify why the Mishnah speaks about Dalet Achim, even if I hold Ein Zika. And the reason is because of Bittul Masechet Yevamot. So why do I need the case of Arba Achim? And because in the case of Arba Achim, if I'm not Choshes L'Misa, I would assume the Levi is going to be Miyabim Rachel and Yehuda is going to be Miyabim Leah. And we have a double kiyum of Mitzvahs Yibum. Hooray, hooray. No, Komash Malon, the Mishnah is telling me a big chiddush in Arba Achim with Choshes L'Misa. I'm wondering, I don't know, I don't see anyone pointing this out, but the whole business about Chayshina L'Misa is a Shas sugya. I mean, this is an issue all over the place. Like, for example, if you open up Masechet Yevamot, and the Mishnah says at the beginning of Yoma that we have to make sure that there's a replacement Kohen Gadol in case, a replacement wife for the Kohen Gadol, in case the wife of the Kohen Gadol dies, and we don't have the possibility, therefore, of the Kohen Gadol doing the avoda on Yom Kippur because the Torah says Beisa Zuishta. So the Gemara says, are we Choshes L'Misa? We're not Choshes L'Misa. Or for example, in Masechet Gittin, when a shliach is sent on a long trip with a get, how do we know that by the time he arrives, it takes 6 months till he crosses the seas and he delivers the get, that the Baal is still alive? Maybe we should be Choshes L'Misa. That issue of Chayshina L'Misa is a really outstanding issue. It has many nafkavinas. Here the Gemara, like tucked away in the middle of Yevamot, says that, yeah, we have to be worrying about these, that maybe Yehuda will die before he gets a chance to be Miyabim Leah. I don't understand that. Let's see the Gemara's objection. If the reason is because of Bittul Mitzvahs Yibum, and we are choshish that maybe Yehuda, the second brother, will die, and that's exactly why the Mishnah mentioned Arba Achim. If that be the case, here we turn to Chopav Amid Beis, Ben Chamisha. The Mishnah should have given me a case of 5 brothers. 2 of the 5 are married to 2 sisters. So Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah, respectively. And then there are 3 other brothers. There's Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar. Now, Reuven and Shimon, who are married to Rachel and Leah, respectively, died without children. And then Rachel and Leah fall for Yibum in front of Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar. Is Nami. Here too, the din will be that we're not going to allow Yibum because of Bittul Mitzvahs Yevamot. Why? Let's say Levi will go ahead and be Miyabim Rachel. Now maybe both Yehuda and Yisachar will die before they could be Miyabim. Any of them could be Miyabim Leah. And therefore the mitzvah of Yibum will be Bata. Because any of these, one second, wait, there were two sisters, right? So now Yehuda and Yisachar die. Levi had already been miyabim Rachel, and therefore Leah will be stuck without Yibum or Chalitza. So this is an expansion of Chashin Lamisa. No, it's Chashin Lamisa usually means we're worried that this Baal Davar, this one individual, will die. Now we say Chashin Lamisa that two of them will die. Now, I don't know, the Gemara is going to probably ask about 6 brothers and 50 brothers. I don't know what Ein L'Davar Sov. How many people are we choshish to die and no one is going to be miyabim Leah? Poor Leah is left, hanging in midair. Levi was already miyabim Rachel, and therefore she won't have Yibum to Levi because she's a chosishta, and all the other brothers die. So there's Lamisa the tray, lo chayshina. We almost guessed what's coming around the bend. I didn't cheat. That there's a limit to chayshina Lamisa. Like for example, the Mishnah in the beginning of Yoma says that we establish a second wife, not a third one. Why not a third wife? Maybe his first wife, his wife will die, and the second string wife will die. And Ein L'Davar Sov. We're not choshish for the death of 2 people. Now I don't know if the halacha would change if they're in a hospital on a ventilator. At what point do we say maybe chayshina lemisa? Even people might. I notice here footnote number 2, dates. You see that? Picture Rishonim said the Yuma Rabbanan Sovish Chayshina Lemisa Detre. Okay, I don't remember that Gemara. Now let's see number Gimel. He gives a little bit of a short summary of some of the points that we touched. Hayotzi l'maskonas haGemara sheyesh ka machlokes. L'madi yom yesh zika is afiluk shenoflu shtei hayevamot l'fnei mea achin, and you wouldn't say chayshim lemis in 100 brothers. Nevertheless, asurus liyisyavim, because again, it's always going to be achos kukos. Aval l'madi yom mishum b'tol mitzvos yevamim v'chamisha achin uteres lo chayshim lemis l'shnei. Okay. Now, in the case of the 2 sisters in our Mishnah, the psak of the Mishnah is that there's no yibum. There's only a possibility of chalitza. Just one second. Where is chalitza psula in our Mishnah? I don't remember that we had such a thing. That's the next parak. We have chalitza in a muberes. Where's chalitza psula here? One second. Arba achim. Naimim nesus shtei achis. Hanosus achis relu choltzos lo misyavos. I don't see, where do we get chalitza psula? Did I miss something? You go to Achios, you say nikreis chalitzasa, chalitza psula. What's that all about? Chalitza psula. Yeah. Try one more time here. Below Misyam.
Where the possibility of evil cut off, then the chalitza, even though it's down.
Is that something that's in our Mishnah? Because I didn't catch it in our Mishnah. One second. You have what? You have Reuben and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. Now, so we have situation of also. Give me one more minute. I'm sorry. I just feel a little bit uncomfortable here. Chalitza psula business. Oh, wait a second. There's something here back on the Mishnah on Chavavam and Aleph. We just turned to Chavavam and Beis. But if you look back on Chavavam and Aleph, so the Mishnah says, Arba'ach nesuim l'shtei achios, Shnayim nesuim l'shtei achios, and Mesu hanesus achios, Areil choltzos below misyavos. All right, so if you take a look, there is a footnote in the Mesifta, number Yudal. You have that? So again, if you have the Mesifta, it's Chavav Amar Aleph Beis. Beis meaning in the brackets is Beis. So we're looking at footnote Yudal. He says, Lefi Rav, Sover Lekamon, the Gemara, B'chalitza Sula, Hainu Chalitza Grua, Shesibas Hachapol, Siba Shecholetzes, Hu Mishum Shasur L'Yisyavu. That's what you were saying, Jay, right? That since there's no possibility of Yibum, therefore he needs Chalitza. He says, Gam kan me'achar v'shtei achios choltzos chalitzos psula re'asuros l'syavim tzrich kol achas me'em chalitza mishnei ha'achim. Whoa, this is a whole honestly, this is like a whole new sugya here. And the whole thrust of this is to require chalitza from both of the brothers. See, theoretically, you should have you could have argued that one brother could be choletz both of these sisters. Right? Why can't Levi give chalitza both? But he says here, tzricha kol achas mem chalitza mishnei ha'achim. And apparently that's because of this new concept called chalitza psula. Okay. So let's see. Omar Rava Barav Hunam Rav Sholosh Achios Yevamos Shenoflu Fnei Shnei Achim Yevamim. So we have now 5 brothers: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar, and we have 2 sisters. Oh no, we have 3 sisters. Sorry, we have Rachel, Leah, and Sarah. Right? So Levi marries Rachel, Yehuda marries Leah, and Yisachar marries Sarah. Now Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar die, and these 3 sisters, Rachel, Leah, and Sarah, fall for Yibum to Reuven and Shimon, the 2 surviving brothers. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, no? Yeah, but wait a second. There are 3 sisters. So let's say Reuven is choletz one of the 3 sisters. Shimon is choletz another of the 3 sisters. And Emtsoiv, which I guess is the 3rd sister, or he has to call it Emtsoiv. So anyway, tzricha chalitza mishnein. He must have a chalitza from both of the surviving brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Again, this is the same strange phenomena that we came across before in that note on the Mishnah. Why does this girl, this 3rd sister, need chalitza from both Reuven and Shimon, the 2 surviving brothers? It doesn't make any bit of sense. Why should her status be any different than the other 2 sisters, each one of which gets 1 chalitza? No, both brothers have to give a chalitza. She gets a double chalitza. It's a pele v'chiddush. I mean, where do we ever find that a woman needs 2 chalitza?
There's a,
Yeah.
since the Zika on the tree.
Wait, I'm sorry, Jeff. Start again if you don't mind.
Since the Zika forges a bond between each of the surviving brothers, a chalitza sula by one of them will not solve the Zika of the others. Rather, each of the brothers must form his own so as to resolve his personal Zika bond. Although each brother's deficient does not resolve his own Zika bond. His Zika bond too is due to his inability to form metal.
The last few words. Did you say deficient?
Sula.
Read it again if you don't mind. Those last few words.
However, when the chalitza is not replaced, although each brother's chalitza is deficient, it does not dissolve his own Zika bond. His Zika bond too is deficient due to his inability to perform evil.
So the phrase here is a deficient Zika bond. It's a whole new concept.
Yeah.
I thought I knew something about your bumps, but I was fooling myself. There's such a thing as a deficient Zika bond.
When it's false. It's not a
Right. Yes, no other. Yibum was not a choice. I'll be honest, it sounds to me, it's almost laughable, that what we're learning here is that there are two dinim in chalitza. One chalitza is necessary to be matir halashuk, and there's another chalitza that becomes like a chovas gavra on the yavam. She doesn't need the chalitza, but he needs to give her the chalitza. I don't know. It's pretty wild. And we have to qualify that. When does he need a chalitza? When there's something deficient in the Zika relationship, there was no possibility of what is, this is a whole hodgepodge. I don't know how to fit this into a logical pattern. Anyway, all this is in the name of Ra. Amalei Rabba. And now Rabba turns back to Rava, who says this in the name of Ra. Nida ka'amed emtsa is stricha chalitza mishneim is kasavris yesh zika. And yesh zika means now that, right, who are the two surviving brothers? We call them Reuben and Shimon. So these two surviving brothers both have a zika, which is going to generate a chiyuv chalitza. We called it a chovas gavra. This is chalitza. The havyullah chalitza psula. Right? Shekain kol. I'm reading the translation. Kol chalitza she'ena machmas rotzon hayavam. Because he's not really interested in chalitza, but he has no choice. Ela machmas sha'osur lo liyavim nikreis chalitza psula. This is exactly what we saw in the footnote on the Mishnah. V'kan he asur liyibum mishum she'achos chalutza. Okay, so now if you're holding yesh zika, v'chalitza psula tzorach lachzor kol ha'ach. Lachzor kol ha'ach. She need, or I don't know, she needs it, or I don't know exactly what, but there has to be a chalitza on the part of implemented by each one of the ach. Correct? So he writes here, ulekabel mehem chalitza. Kidei lakor es hazika shel kol ach v'ach. Ki chalitza psula kocha kalush v'eno mafkia es hazika hakayemes klapi kol ha'ach. It's normally one ach gives chalitza and he represents all the other ach. But here that you have a weak chalitza because he's forced to do chalitza, he has no choice. There was no option of yivu. That chalitza which is weak and it's downgraded cannot serve as a representative chalitza, like an agency, on behalf of the other ach. Each ach has a zik. Normally, if all things were equal, we would say that if one of the achim implements chalitza, he's mafkir the zika from the entire bias, from all the brothers. But here, when you have a downgraded chalitza, it's like a sug bet, what do they call it when you go to they used to have these stores. I don't know if it still existed today, where you if something slightly damaged, you pay half prices. Seconds, they call it. So here it's a chalitza, a chalitza chalusha, he calls it, or kolush, a new din of kolush. It reminds me of your day. We had a tam kolush, like tam pagu, Is such a chalitza cannot be mafkia as a representative for all the brothers. I wish he would sharpen the lumdus here. Eina mafkia sazika kayemes klapi kol ha'ach. Klomar shevitov shehitzrich ra l'shneim lachlots. Like that's what it says in Rav's words that the emtsoy is tricha chalitza b'shneim. Is mevur shehu sover shechalitza psula tricha lachzor al kol ha'ach. V'muchach nikach sheledaito yesh zika. Yemein zika ein makom lahatzu chalitza leklu. Shrei ein tzorch lafkia zikasa. By definition, if you're requiring chalitza because of zika, if there was no zika, then why require chalitza? The whole purpose of chalitza is to mafkia zika, but if there's no zika, so we must be holding yesh zika. All right, so what's the problem? What is Rabbah leading up to? Ihachi kamaisa nami. Okay, let's see what kamaisa nami means. If you're holding it in the case of chalitza psula tzricha lachzor is shtei achios. In other words, why does Rav have the case of shalosh? Let's say shtei achios shenaflu liyibum barishona. Nami yitztarchu kol echas men chalitza mishnei achios. When the yesh zika asuros famous yavim b'chalitzasam psula b'shal rav shal rak achrona tzricha lachzor kol ha'ach. So here's the question: Does the halacha require that both Reuven and Shimon do a chalitza for all these sisters? And we said no. we said that choletz liachas, right? Zeh choletz liachas is zeh choletz liachas. Why is that so? In each case, you're talking about a chalitza psula. It's only when we got to the third sister that she required a chalitza for both Reuben and Shimon. As far as the first two sisters are concerned, they require only one chalitza from either Reuven or Shimon. I mean, whoever it is, it doesn't make a difference. But now we should require that Reuven and Shimon give chalitza not only to the third sister, but to the first two sisters as well. Because the same logic of chalitza psula is chozer ala achim, tvichalatza ala achim. That should apply to the first two sisters as well. So why does Rav say that only the third sister requires chalitza from both the Yevamot? So the Gemara answers, "I did nafel b'vas achas achenami lo tzricha did nafel b'zu achar zu nafla chada cholitz la Ruvain nafla ida cholitz la Shimon nafla idach is cholitz la high mafka zikaso cholitz la high mafka zikaso." This is one of the rare cases where the Gemara actually fills in names, I think. I don't remember that we saw that in the past. Okay, so nafel b'masachas. Let's take it from the top. Let's say that all these sisters fell for yibum b'masachas. What does that mean? That, let's say, Levi died first, and his wife Rachel fell for yibum, but there was no chalitza yet, and now Yehuda dies and Yisachar dies. So that's called nafel b'vas achas. All three of them now fall for yibum to, I guess, Reuben and Shimon at the same time, because when Levi's wife Rachel fell for yibum after Levi died, there was no chalitza until Yehuda died and Yisachar died. Is hachinami, in this case, the din would be that each one of these Yevamos, each one of these sisters, would require chalitza from both of the brothers. He writes that kulan tzrichas l'siyamim v'nesru kulan mishum achos l'kuka v'lachein chalitza psula v'kol achas men tzricha lachsa kol ha'achim. Lo tzricha, but what case was Rav discussing? The nafel b'zu achar zu. Okay, so nafel zu achar zu, what happens? Nafla chada cholitz la Ruven. So Rachel, we said, was married to Levi. So Levi died, and Reuven went ahead and he was cholitz immediately. And at this point, the other sisters, we'll call it Leah and Sarah, right? They didn't fall for Yibum yet, because right now just Levi died. So that chalitza of Reuven is a chalitza kshera. He says, Kevan shahoisa muteres b'yibum sharei ein aleha isra achos kukasa, because there's no other kuka, because the other brothers, let's say, for example, Yehuda didn't die yet. So that chalitza in its time was a perfectly valid chalitza. Now Yehuda dies. V'nafla ida. So let's say Yehuda was married to Leah. So Leah now falls to Yibo. V'choletz l'shimon. Choletz l'shimon. And this chalitza is also a chalitza kshera because there would have been a heter yibum. Isn't she achos kukoso? But they were mafkia the zika from Rachel because Reuven implemented a chalitza. Oh, that's very sharp. Now Yisachar dies. Enofla Ida. So now Sarah, the wife of Yisachar, falls for Yibum to Reuven and Shimon. Now Sarah is Asura Liyibum to Reuven and Shimon. Why? That's called Achos Chalutzasam. Sharei Choltu the Rachel Leah. Wait, now I don't understand. But we just said that Pakaz. We just established that Pakaz Zika because of the Chalitza. So now I don't get it. When we get to the death of Yisachar, so then we already had two chalitzos that were implemented by Reuven and Shimon. So why is there a problem over here? Nofla idach. Now Sarah, the wife of Yisachar, falls for Yibum to Reuven and Shimon, and now there's no possibility of Yibum. Now we have a chalitza psula. Kevan shehi achos chalitzasam. Reikvar choltu the Rachel v'Leah ach Yosef v'alkein chalitzasa psula. Right, so that last point I don't understand why the third is considered achos chalutzasa, and yet the second is not considered achos chalutzasa. We always said that the chalitza is mafkia the zika. I'm not sure why. So, but if we had more time, we'd try to work this out. So we'll leave this for Yom Rishon, and I'll take this opportunity to wish you a great job. But we made quite a bit of progress here. I mean, this is a whole new world here is opened up in front of us. I'm curious to know whether these are the Raisa halachas or the Rabbanan halachas.
I saw a note that
I mean, that makes sense, but the way the Gemara is developing it here, it sounds like we're dealing with the Dorais. I don't know. All right. So just remind me on Sunday that we're learning the third pair, not the fourth pair. All right, good job.